Okay, so this is the second tutorial, and we're looking at trying to add some information to this QGIS map. Um, what I've gone ahead and done to make this work is I went and downloaded a crime map from the city of Chicago. It's crimes in 2014, so it's not a very big map compared to other maps, but it should illustrate what we want to do here. So what I want to do in order to bring that map in is I want to create a new layer, and I want to click on Add Delimited Text File. Now in this dialog box, I'm going to go to Browse, and I'm going to find my Excel file, which it should be saved as a CSV file. I saved it as a CSV file from the database. You need to do that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and open that file. Now you want to make sure CSV is selected, and then we're going to have to modify a couple other things. Now I tried to bring this in, and QGIS has got to interpret the latitude and longitude. And inside this database, there's an actual lat and long value. But when I brought it in with those fields, setting up the map points, I couldn't get it to line up with our existing map. So what I ended up doing is I looked in this a little bit more, and I see this x coordinate and y coordinate. And what it's basically doing is it's for the x field here, it's giving a special x coordinate based on a value that the City of Chicago has produced. So I'm going to go ahead and change this x field to x coordinate, and I'm going to do the same thing for y field. I'm going to change it to y coordinate. And so then when I press OK, I'm going to get this error. And it's basically telling me that 260 records were discarded due to missing geometry definitions. What that means is that there wasn't a coordinate on them, so it can't define them on our map, which isn't that big of a deal. So I just say OK. Now it's asking me what CRS we want to use, which if you remember the last tutorial, we want to use this generated CRS. So everything lines up. So we pick that and click OK, and it's going to think for a minute, and then our crime map pops up. Now this is kind of generic information. We can go into the attribute table, and we can see more specific information. So if you wanted to see how many of these crimes had arrests made, you could search your data and filter it based on something like that. You could look at what kind of crime it was, burglary, theft, all of these different things. And you could set up filters to filter out that data. I guess maybe I'll show that to you real quick. So what you want to do to make that happen is you click on the little math symbol button there, and it brings up this expression builder. And this is going to allow me to create kind of a code for filtering this data. So I want to pick on fields and values, and let's just say that I want to select this by I want to select it by an arrest, whether or not an arrest was made. So I look for that. I look for arrest, and there it is. I select that. And if I double click it, it brings that string into the thing. So I want to see every crime where an arrest was not made. So I'm going to set that equal to false. I should be able to get my field values over here. So this load all unique field values is that every different value that's in that field, it will load it. And the reason why you want to do that is you want to double click. You want to be able to just on this expression, you want to make sure that the expression is written properly, and so maybe you capitalize false and then it doesn't work. But if you double click it, it's going to put false in there, and you should know it's going to work. So this expression should work for us. So let's go ahead and select it and see what happens. And then if you look at the map, now some of our points are highlighted. And so those highlighted points, which are the brighter yellow points, all those are points now which no arrest was made. And then the other points that aren't highlighted were points where arrests were made. Since there were only two possible values in our expression, you can filter it by that. If there were more, then you might not be able to determine that. And then you could get even more specific and look at it inside your specific neighborhood. We could have filtered this crime map out the same way that we did the other one. I left it on because I think we get, actually, you know what, I changed my mind on that. Well, let's go ahead and do that because we're going to have to do it at some point, so we might as well do it now. So in order to do that, and we went over this in the last tutorial, so if you don't remember it, you can, or if you need a more in-depth explanation, you can reference that. But as we go to clip, we find the layer we want to clip, and then we find our clipping layer, which I kept, and then name our file. And it already exists because I've done this already. I just didn't keep that. I just wanted to show you how it worked, so that's the reason why that was in there. And it asked me if I want to put it on the map, which I do. It asked me what CRS I want to use, which once again we want to use the generated CRS. And I tell it OK. And then I close this out, and I can either turn off or remove this file. I think I'm just going to leave it turned off for the time being. So now the expression that we built in the last one, it didn't carry over. So we would want to redo that. So we would open that attribute table, and if you wanted to filter this data based on some of these things, then you could do that. Now, there's much less information in here. So already we're filtering our data because we're filtering it within a specific region. And then if you wanted to look at other things, whether, I mean, any of this data, you should be able to set up an expression that will just select that data, whether it's the type of crime or if it's classified as domestic a domestic crime or whatever. Maybe you want to get rid of domestic crimes because they're a little different socially than violent crimes or something like that. So they don't have felonies or misdemeanors in here. It's just kind of disappointing because I think that'd be a good one to have, but it's not in here. I suppose you could do it with this primary TY, which I'm assuming means type. But you can only put what you have in here. Now we could also make our own tables, and if we wanted to go through and classify them as a felony versus a misdemeanor, we could kind of do some research on what these types are. Battery may be a felony. Other motor vehicles probably a misdemeanor. So you could go through and you could make a string or an integer value based on that, and then you could sort them yourselves. But that's a lot of work. Um, there's 137 of these, so you'd have to do it for each and every one. And unless you're really going to get a lot out of it, I don't know that it's going to be worth it. But you do have the option. I'm actually going to get out of this attribute table now, and we're going to create a heat map to create a visual representation of what this data means. This is a little bit different than what was done on the Wednesday lecture, but it's close enough that I think you could use it as a tool. So let me just show that to you. So in order to get the heat map up, you're going to have to do a couple things. You want to go to View and your toolbars, and then you're going to want to go down and select your raster because it's going to be deselected. And if you don't have that on, then none of these are going to work. So you're looking for this specific icon here, this kind of two yellow dots. That's the heat map icon. So with Clipped Crimes 2014 selected, I want to pick the heat map plugin. And it's already brought in my Clipped Crimes 2014, but if for some reason this layer wasn't on there, then you could, it's going to give you all of the available point layers. So I also have libraries on here, so you could put those in there. This output raster, it's just what you're going to name your file. And I'm going to call it Heatmap Crime 2014. This radius, I want to change it to map units. So because my map is set up in feet and inches, and I don't want it to be meters. And we're going to do this twice to illustrate something. I'm going to leave this 500 selected. So basically, this is saying it's going to evaluate these points at a 500-foot radius. All of these advanced tabs, I haven't really messed with them. I guess you can change the kernel shape and things like that if you wanted to. I don't want to at this point. But maybe you could play around with that and get a different visual output. So I'm satisfied with this, so I'm just going to select OK, and it creates this kind of blob all over my map. And this is with the kind of the smaller radius, the radius of 500 feet, which isn't really that big of a radius on this size of a map. Now I can go in and I can right-click on this heat map and go to Properties. Whoops. Go to Properties. One of the things I can do is set my transparency so it doesn't blot out. It's not quite as overpowering. If I just click Apply, you can see that makes it a lot more readable with the other elements of the map. In style, you can change your style a little bit. So we can change it to, you've got all these different selections. So you could set up these color bands if you wanted it to be certain colors and set your min-max values. And I think he went over something similar than that in the lecture. The paletted, you could set up your own color palette. It's not red, blue, and green. The straight single band gray is what was selected by default. But I like this single band pseudo color. It's going to give me all of these different options that I can pick from. I'm just going to leave it at the top here, which are these blues. This continuous, if you select equal interval, then you can up the number of intervals that you have. You could set it to 10 or whatever. And if you click this classify button, then it'll show you the values that it's representing. And what these end up being are the distances from where each individual crime happens, and then how they correlate together So if there's a place where a lot of crimes are happening in a small radius, then you're going to get a darker color. But these actual values seem pretty. I'm sure that there's a mathematical logic behind it, but I don't really know what it is, and I think it would take a lot to kind of figure it out. So these numbers aren't as. I don't think you're going to look at these and go, oh, okay, well, I want to really tweak this particular value. But if you did, you could select it and double click it and then edit it. You could change it around if you had a more rational or more understandable value set, maybe with a different kind of map, you might um, you could do something like that. There's also some filter. You can add colors in here, but for the most part, I just kind of leave it um, with the with the intervals set up. Um, you can change your mins and max values. So, if you wanted a tighter spread, you could increase your min or decrease your max. Um, you can also set it up by mean and standard deviations, which are more for statistical analysis. You can play with these as you want and see if you can get outputs for that are more tailored towards what you're looking for. You can also save these styles so that if you're going to do 4 or 5 of these maps, maybe you're going to do a decade-long comparison. You're going to download 2001 through 2011, or 2003 through 2013. Um, you could save this style and then just load it for each and every one of those and maybe tweak it a little bit so it had a slightly different effect or something like that. But I'm not doing that here, so I'm just going to click apply and take a look at what I have. And it's still, it's a little better looking with it being transparent and with it having more of a color than the gray, but it still looks like I spilled water on my map or something. Like it just doesn't look good to me. And what I really think the problem is that it's not showing enough of a correlation between some of these points. Like where there's a bunch of them together, you start to see it, but over here maybe there should be more of a correlation. But it's not showing that. And right here, it's not showing that either. Now, this is also 2014. We've only had 31 days worth of crime statistics. So if you were to download the 2012 map or something like that, you'd probably have a much larger spread of information. And maybe this 500-foot radius would work for you. But for the amount of information we have on this spread, I think the 500-foot radius is just kind of not quite up to the task. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that on there, but I'm going to turn it off, and I'm going to make another one. So I'm going to select my heat map again. I'm going to call this heat map crime 2014, except I'm going to say this is a 1,200-foot radius. I'm just going to put 1,200 on there. Get rid of that space at the end. And so then in this radius, I need to change that. So I'm going to change it to 1,200. Select OK. Now I came into kind of the same format as before. So I do want to go in and change some of my properties. I want that transparency to be at 50% or around 50%. And then the style, I'm going to do the same. Same style that I did before. And I'm going to leave all the other settings the same so that you can get a pretty good comparison. And now I think you start to see something that at least visually looks better, and the gradients look like they're more beneficial to us. Like we kind of start to see a pattern rather than just blobs. Now, I still don't like these where there's just one point. It's got this 1,500-foot circle drawn around it, and it's kind of coloring the map. I think if I were really interested in crime in my area, I would probably try to figure out some way to have it so that it's not including that interval, or it's giving me a clear color for one. But I couldn't figure out how to do that. I tried, and ultimately it's getting late, and I just kind of figured, this would give you a pretty decent representation if you were interested in this. And this can be done with any point data too. So you can, all the My Fact Finder stuff, if you want to get specific census data, you can bring it in. I think your biggest challenge is going to be making it graphically look nice, and also making sure that your XYs are going to match up. So we may have to look at that tomorrow, because I don't really know how that's done, because I didn't go to the My Fact Finder and download anything. But maybe tomorrow somebody will have a specific thing that they want to download, and we can see if we can get it in the map and do that. But this is gonna output as a TIFF file, which you should be able to edit in Photoshop, and maybe do a little bit of editing in Illustrator as well. So it won't have the vector data on it. So it's not like this is going to export to AutoCAD or something like that. This is an image. It's a raster layer. So, but I think it could be useful, a useful tool. So that's it for this tutorial, and that's going to be it for the night. So if you watch these before class tomorrow, that's great. If not, then maybe you'll see them after class, or maybe we'll get your question answered in class. So then you won't have to watch it. So let me go ahead and turn this off, and see you tomorrow.